Hello everyone. So this particular CRT Spotlight video is going to be quite the special one today because in this episode we're going to be taking a look at one of the icons of this hobby. Now, of course, there are the tubes which are iconic for their sheer image quality, but then there are those tubes that are iconic for just being plain cool. And here is one of those very tubes, my Samsung GXTV. Now, never mind the descriptions on those endless Facebook Marketplace listings for basic Vega sets with asinine asking prices. This GXE-1395, which hit the market in the year 1996, is arguably the very first television ever produced specifically with video gaming in mind. Judging by the swirl of marketing material for this television that was released at the time, there's no doubt that the PR team at Samsung really wanted to build this thing up as something totally cutting edge for the modern gamer of the era. However, now that I finally have one of these crazy things here in my possession, and given the decent sample size of tubes that I very fortunately have access to, my question is, how does the Samsung GX actually compare to the mythical hype that is around it? So, to answer that, let's, of course, begin with a tour of the features packed into this television. No doubt, the most eye-catching thing about the GX would be these two panels flanking the picture tube. These doors serve a double duty, where firstly, when in the fully closed position, they make for a rather unique cover for protecting the glass surface of the CRT. But then, of course, we get to the much more important reason behind these door panels. Along the inside face, we find the two stereo speakers for the television. This has to be quite the quirky but awesome design. Having the speakers on these adjustable hinges allow you to physically position them in just the right way for your listening pleasure. What's even more remarkable is that Samsung managed to design these speaker housings to have the proper amount of magnetic shielding so that when these doors are in the closed position, the drivers in the speakers will not interfere with the shadow mask inside of the tube. And just when you thought we were done with speakers, Samsung decided to hit you with a, but wait, there's more, and shove a miniature subwoofer into this enclosure on top of the GX. Now, keep in mind, this thing is from the era where it was difficult to find a 13-inch television with just two speakers for stereo sound. But then here comes this thing, which is sporting three of them. Now, there's a lot we need to talk about regarding sound on this TV, but I'm going to get to that discussion a little bit later in this video. Right now, though, let's continue with our tour around the outside of the GX. Smack up front is, of course, our cathode ray tube, this one being a 13-inch slot mask produced in-house at Samsung. And below the screen lies the usual assortment of built-in controls and a stereo headphone jack. A few things among these items that are unique to the GX would be the indicator lights for the subwoofer and surround sound feature, and a dedicated button for a GX mode. More on what that does in just a bit. Another rather distinctive attribute of this TV would be the special stand that is attached to the bottom of the chassis. Constructed with a form of a ball and socket joint, this stand allows you to rotate the television from side to side, as well as pivot up and down, which I find to be a desirable feature considering how close Samsung intended their users to be sitting from the screen. These kinds of stands were much more common on PC monitors at the time, but were somewhat of a rarity to find on consumer televisions from this era. And then finally, after rotating the GX completely around, we come to the input panel located on the back. By the 1990s, it was safe to assume that the majority of this television's target audience would own multiple game consoles by this point. So thankfully, Samsung provided a pair of stereo composite inputs on this TV, allowing multiple systems to be connected at the same time. Curiously though, the manufacturer also included a composite output on this television as well. While you could use this video pass-through as a means to daisy chain an additional monitor off of this one, Samsung went so far as to suggest sending video from these outputs to a VCR so that you can directly record footage of your gameplay. I find it quite humorous in this modern age of video game streaming and capture cards that the concept of recording a gaming session for future review and enjoyment was being advertised as a concept almost 30 years ago on this TV. Interestingly enough, for additional inputs, we have not one, but two coaxial RF connections. The top one is intended to serve as the standard antenna or cable box connection, like what is universally found on pretty much every other television on the market at the time. However, Samsung also included a second coaxial input specifically for content being fed to it from a VCR or game console set to transmit at VHF channel 3 or 4. Now, when I first brought home my GX, I was curious if this second coaxial port was only limited to just channel 3 and 4, like how they are labeled on the TV, or if it in fact does have access to the same full spectrum of channels that the regular RF input would have. Now, while the RF modulators in pretty much every game console available in North America are limited to only outputting on VHF 3 or 4, I can actually test to see if those higher channels are there on the second input by using my Channel Plus 5445 modulator. If I feed a test signal to input A on the Channel Plus, which I have programmed to transmit out at UHF channel 15, and then feed it into this switch box that is then connected to both coaxial jacks on the GX, when I flip between outputs on the switcher, sure enough, there is the same test pattern on the second input, just as the same as when it was viewed through the first RF port. Oddly enough though, if the television is put into GX mode, only channels 3 and 4 are available to view on either of these two coax ports, with everything higher in the band being blocked off. But that pretty much covers everything there is to see on this television's overall design. Now, let's turn our attention to the screen itself and check out the image quality of that tube. Now, here's where the mythic nature of this television begins to face a bit of scrutiny, unfortunately. From all of the marketing that surrounded this television set, you would think that the CRT inside the GX would be some top-of-the-line marvel, but here we find an image that is honestly quite standard fare, all things considered. The CRT inside of this television, a Samsung A34KQV42X, is an off-the-shelf tube that is shared across a number of basic consumer sets from a variety of different brands throughout the later half of the 1990s and into the 2000s. It's certainly not bad to look at whatsoever. The tube does serve its purpose as well as it can do. However, I can absolutely see why some members of the CRT enthusiast community will describe the image quality on the GXTV as leaving something to be desired. I think it would be interesting to provide you with some direct comparisons. So first off, let's pit it up against this Panasonic CTP-1351R from 1992, which is another basic consumer set, albeit with an admittedly rather cool minimalist design. Color, brightness, and contrast are all quite comparable with one another. However, the Panasonic does look to be ever so slightly crisper to the eyes versus the tube that the GX is sporting. And for an even tougher matchup, let's now compare the Samsung to the Sony KV-13M42 that is also from around the same era. Here, the softness of the GX's CRT becomes even more noticeable, with some of the fine details being much more razor sharp on the Trinitron. Mind you, this is all being shown to you over composite video as well. While the market adoption of component video wouldn't really take place until the turn of the century, it is somewhat of a shame that Samsung decided to exclude an S-video port on the GXTV, despite the relative obscurity of the display format compared to how ubiquitous composite video was at the time. For a television targeted at video gamers, having S-video as an additional option to get a little more detail out of that picture tube would have been really nice to have. Now, as for that GX mode, what exactly does that do? Well, to be completely honest, at least as of the time of writing the script for this video, I do not actually have an answer to that question. When doing research for this episode, I combed through a bunch of press material and forum posts looking for a definitive answer, but I just couldn't find one that really satisfied me. Even the instruction manual itself is rather vague about the GX mode's actual function. From what I've been able to determine, essentially GX mode is just a special default setting for both the screen and the sound system that Samsung thought would be ideal for video gaming. There are other presets available through the menu as well. However, the GX mode button on both the TV itself and on the matching remote sort of acts as a one-touch solution for enabling that special preset. As for what exactly it changes, really, it just seems like it lowers the brightness and tweaks the contrast and color settings around a bit. Now, for most of us today, when you think of a game mode on a modern television, this is usually a special setting that manufacturers would offer that disables any post-processing image effects and optimizes playback for the least amount of latency and input lag as possible. In the digital era, this type of setting makes absolutely perfect sense to have, as many of the enhancement features that lend themselves well to, say, movie watching would be quite undesirable for video gaming. However, with this thing here, this is analog television that we are dealing with. You don't need a setting to eliminate input lag because there is simply no input lag whatsoever to begin with. The electron guns inside the CRT spit each scan line directly onto the screen the exact same moment they receive the incoming signal from the connected game console or whatever. And once you understand how this display technology works, you realize there really isn't all that much that a CRT TV could do to enhance the image specifically for video gaming. Although, maybe I missed something during my research. If anyone watching this really knows the ins and outs of these Samsung GX TVs and is familiar with exactly what that feature does, please let me know in the comments. I mean, I do hear a relay clicking back there every time I cycle the television in and out of GX mode, so maybe there is some sort of enhancement circuit inside of the TV that I just wasn't aware of. But regardless, from the rather negligible changes that this feature makes to the television, I must say that in my opinion, the GX mode on the Samsung GX TVs is really more of a gimmick than anything else. However, do you want to know something that I believe is absolutely, without a doubt, not a gimmick on these televisions? Well, it's those speakers. Oh man, if you were getting a bit worried that I was being slightly too critical of this TV when discussing how it looks, get ready for the discussion regarding how this thing sounds, because my goodness, the speaker system inside of the Samsung GX TV is where this television really shines. The audio that this television is capable of putting out is just nothing short of incredible. You know what, rather than just attempting to describe it, I'm going to let the television speak for itself. Do yourself a favor and enjoy the following clip with some headphones or a good sound system on your end to really get that full effect. Tell me how you think this sounds. it's unreal that this amount of sound is coming out of a television this small. I challenge you to find another 13-inch tube that could top the GX in audio performance. To really drive this point home, let's do a back-to-back comparison with that Trinitron I featured a little bit earlier and compare how it sounds in relation to the GXTV. Yeah, there is absolutely no contest here. Okay, granted, that Trinitron only has a single mono 5-watt speaker to work with, but even some of my later model 13-inch tubes that do have 2 speakers for stereo sound still can't compete once the additional subwoofer inside of the GX gets involved. A lot of what makes these speakers great is the fact that you are able to physically adjust the angle of the 2 side speakers via the pivoting doors. With a screen this size, odds are you're most comfortable viewing it from a few feet away, such as when set up on a desktop or tabletop. With the speakers in these doors, this allows you to aim them at a slightly inward angle so that the sound coming from them converges right where your head is positioned. The effect this creates is just really something incredible to hear. It feels as though you are wearing a really nice pair of headphones, even though you actually aren't. Tell you what, I'm going to attempt to demonstrate this here for you. So I have my zoom mic attached on top of my camera slider here, with the end of the track corresponding exactly at the point where I have the speakers aimed at. Take a listen as my microphone reaches this point where the speakers converge. And this is definitely going to be one where you would want to listen with headphones on to really get the full effect. Yeah, pretty dang cool, right? So I'm the type of person where good audio is just as important as any visuals, and playing my favorite game console that I adore the sound of on this television has just been a real treat for me. I've only owned this GXTV for a few weeks now, but it's been getting near daily use from me since coming home simply because of how much fun I am having playing all my favorite Genesis games with that sound system. And even with the rather average quality of the tube itself, I actually find myself really liking how things look on this screen. The slightly soft composite blurring actually feels really cozy for me. There's just something about it that feels wonderfully natural and, well, analog. So I own tubes that will easily run circles around this thing when it comes to just sheer image quality, but sometimes a smoother blended image like this can be just as enjoyable as the razor sharp results you get from a much higher quality CRT. Every time I try to compare this television with some of the other examples in my collection that on paper would be of far better quality than Samsung's product here, I'm always reminded of that Top Gear meme when considering my passions for the GXTV. Now, don't get me wrong, there absolutely are options out there for some of you who would want to push this tube to its maximum potential. While it is a shame that Samsung neglected to offer S-video inputs on this television, it is possible to modify it so that it can accept those signals. And fortunately, the community has also discovered the means for doing a full RGB mod on the Samsung GX. Don't expect to see any thick scan lines on a fully modded GX though, but at least RGB will sharpen up that somewhat soft tube a little bit more. For me, though, I've been having so much fun with this television just the way it is right now. I am definitely going to be leaving mine completely stock just the way it was from the factory. I can totally see how the rather pathetic image quality of the GXTV can be a deal breaker for some CRT enthusiasts. Namely, the folks that pretty much do nothing else with their tubes other than gawk at the title screen of Super Mario World all day long. But I, however, am one who absolutely loves to play stuff, and the past few weeks since taking this Samsung GXTV into my collection have been some of the most fun I've had with the CRT in a very long time. And I consider myself so lucky with the specific GX that I ended up finding for my collection. This thing is near mint and functions pretty much flawlessly. Oftentimes there are a few common problems that plague these GX TVs, namely issues with the wing speakers, since the wires that feed through the door hinges can develop fatigue and snap apart with age. All of the speakers on mine, though, thankfully work excellently. The screen itself does have a teeny bit of a convergence issue in the lower left corner, but it's really only noticeable when viewing static test patterns. During gameplay, it is nearly impossible to notice this issue, so I'm not gonna go tearing things apart just to try ironing that out. In theory, I would also need to slightly adjust the overscan on the bottom of the screen, since those errant CRAM dots are visible when I have my Genesis connected. However, for some strange reason, I actually do like seeing those quirky little artifacts that this console is known for having, so I'll probably leave that alone as well. However, thankfully, the stand on my GXTV is fully intact, and included with my television when I picked it up is the quite rare OEM remote as well. I am so happy to have such a clean example of one of these televisions to add to my Hall of Fame here. This thing reminds me so much of one of my other favorites from the collection, my Panasonic AG500. The CRTs in either of these won't knock anyone's socks off with their image quality, but man, oh man, the aesthetic and presentation that the design of these two televisions bring to the party make them two of my most favorite CRTs to use. But that about wraps up this look at the legendary Samsung GXTV. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive on one of the coolest televisions to set foot on this plastic folding table of mine in quite a while. It's probably obvious to you by now that I've definitely fallen in love with this thing since bringing it home a few weeks ago. Maybe I'll close out this video with an extended clip of me playing through the first level of the original Streets of Rage for you to enjoy. What follows is all just the raw footage and audio I captured directly with my phone. I didn't even get the high-end microphones out for this one. But hopefully this will really sell just how amazing I find the Samsung GXTV to be. But thank you all for joining me again here on Steve's Assorted Stuff, and until we meet again, have a great day, everybody. you.